Okay, we are now live. We'll give it a minute so we make sure we're coming through on Facebook. All right. I am just waiting for confirmation. Great, wonderful. We are live on the Unite for Hers Facebook page. Wonderful, we got confirmation. So, good afternoon. Happy Thursday as we wrap up the month of September and get ready to start October. As we usually have at the end of every month, we are here this afternoon for our Ask the Experts session. So we do this every month, bringing in experts in various fields that can help to educate us, answer some common questions, connect with our community, answer your questions live on Facebook. And today we are here with a very, very special guest to talk about some really important topics. So we're touching the legal world this afternoon, and we have an incredibly experienced special guest to answer the top 5 legal questions you didn't think to ask. So for our Ask the Expert sessions, know that we are watching our live stream on Facebook. So if you are watching, as we move through these questions, know that you can submit your own questions. And while we have our guest here, we will do our very best to answer all of them. So my name is Erin Pellegrin. I'm happy to be your host this afternoon, and I want to talk a little bit about our Ask the Expert that we have with us because we're so excited to have her. So before I bring her on stage, I just want to share Joanna Morales is a cancer rights attorney, author, speaker, and CEO of Triage Cancer, a national nonprofit organization providing free education on practical and legal issues that may impact individuals coping with cancer and their caregivers through events, materials, and resources. She has more than 25 years working on behalf of individuals with cancer, including 5 as an adjunct professor of law at Loyola Law School, teaching a seminar in cancer rights law, and 8 years at the John Wayne Cancer Institute's Psychosocial Care Program and Positive Appearance Center. She has presented nearly 1,000 educational seminars on employment, insurance, healthcare, and advocacy issues throughout the country for individuals diagnosed with cancer, caregivers, healthcare professionals, advocates, lawyers, employers, and the general public. She's also co-authored the book Cancer Rights Law for the American Bar Association, and most frequently in 2020, she wrote a chapter called Cancer-Related Legal Issues for the Oncology Nursing Society's book. So our special guest this afternoon, she knows her stuff. So without further ado, I would love to bring onto stage Joanna Morales as our special guest. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Erin, for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here. You know, the legal world is so confusing. It can be a huge point of stress. So we're so thankful that you're here to share some knowledge, to, answer some of those questions, direct us on what we should be asking. So we do appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure.
Wonderful. So before we dive into those top 5 questions, I thought it would be a great place to start. If you can answer us, why we should dive a little bit into the legal world. Why should we know this stuff? Why is it so important?
Well, when I tell people that I'm a cancer rights attorney, I often get kind of a funny look. And people say to me, well, what's legal about cancer? And my answer back to them is just about everything. Whether or not a treatment has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration, whether or not your insurance company covers that particular treatment, whether or not you can even get health insurance coverage with a pre-existing condition. Can you take time off work? Can you work through treatment? Estate planning issues, consumer rights. There are so many things that we don't even think about as legal issues, but they're actually rooted in the law. And so at Triage Cancer, our goal is to teach people about what the law says and about what rights they have and what options people have so that they can find their best path forward. because we never want people to make a bad decision because they didn't have the information that they needed. And so, unfortunately, that means delving into some of these legal issues and sorting through the law. But at Triage, we try really hard to translate those more complicated legal issues for the cancer community specifically so that people can make those decisions.
I love that. I'm so glad that we have you as a resource. Do you work with anyone across the country? Could anyone connect with Triage Cancer for assistance?
Absolutely. So if someone visits our website at triagecancer.org, you'll find information about free events that we have coming up. And we do events online, but pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, we will also be hosting in-person educational events. And we do that across the country. We've delivered in-person educational events in every state, DC and Guam. So we feel really strongly about taking education everywhere. But we also have educational materials and resources that people can tap into on our website. Mm-hmm. And then we do also have a legal and financial navigation program where people can get one-on-one assistance asking questions related to their health insurance, their employment issues, disability benefits, and many of the other legal issues that might come up for someone.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Yeah, and perfect. And we just dropped the link in the chat for those that want to visit your website. So I think that's a really great resource to go to. That's wonderful.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so let's dive into our first most frequent, or maybe we should say one of the most important questions we should be asking. How do I pick a health insurance plan with the lowest cost? I know, sort of diving through the world of insurance and all the different companies out there, it can be really stressful. So how do we go about choosing that?
We often say that there should be a class in high school on health insurance coverage because it's one of those things that we all need to navigate, but whoever teaches us. If we're lucky enough, we get our first job and then someone hands us a packet of materials and we have to make a decision. And that isn't really a good way to approach health insurance. We want people to have the key tips on how to actually make those choices. And I'll give you a pretty good example of a way to do that. But this is relevant if someone is looking for individual health insurance coverage, maybe in the marketplace. It's relevant if someone is being offered more than one choice by their employer. You can also compare what your employer offers to what's available in the marketplace and see what's actually better for you. Sometimes employer plans might not cover your providers or have very high out-of-pocket costs, or maybe they have an out-of-pocket maximum that is more than someone could afford and what they can find in the marketplace.
Okay.
It's also relevant if someone's on Medicare. There are different choices to be made related to Medicare, and people can make strategic decisions, specifically about finances, because we know that the cost of cancer care is high. And we know that there's a challenge with the financial burden of a cancer diagnosis. And we refer to that burden as financial toxicity. So when we're talking about, well, how do we mitigate that financial burden? How do we minimize it for someone going through a cancer diagnosis? And in our opinion, the number one way to do that is by making sure you have adequate health insurance coverage. And so in order to do that, it's about picking the right health insurance plan for you. So anytime someone is looking at various health insurance options, the way that you figure out the least expensive plan by the end of the year is you have to take that monthly premium and multiply it by 12, because that's how much it's going to cost you to have the plan for the year. Okay. But then you have to add in the out-of-pocket maximum. And the out-of-pocket maximum is the most that you're going to pay out of pocket for your medical expenses during the year.
Okay.
And the out-of-pocket maximum is actually a fixed dollar amount. And what that amount is going to depend on your plan. So,
and that information is pretty easy to find. I feel like I have seen that in going through at different times, reviewing health insurances. So that number should be something fairly easily located.
Yes, it should be. So every insurance company, whether it's an individual plan or an employer-sponsored plan, is supposed to provide you what's called a summary of benefits and coverage.
Right.
So
okay.
It's like a chart that has key terms about that plan and the key details. And one of the key details is what's the out-of-pocket maximum. Also, if you've ever gotten an explanation of benefits from your health plan where, you've gone to the doctor and then you get a letter from your insurance company that has also kind of a chart looking
Yeah.
page that says what the insurance company paid for and what you're responsible for. Usually now on that explanation of benefits, your insurance company is keeping track of your out-of-pocket maximum, telling you how much you've spent so far during the year that goes towards your out-of-pocket maximum, and then how much you have left to spend before you reach that maximum.
Okay. Okay.
And the reason that out-of-pocket maximum is so important is because when you do reach that dollar amount in out-of-pocket costs, your insurance kicks in at 100% for the rest of the year, and you don't pay any more out of pocket.
Wow.
So if you have had surgery, for example, in the beginning of the year, you probably are going to reach your out-of-pocket maximum. So for the rest of the year, you shouldn't be paying co-payments or co-insurance amounts or any portion that goes to your deductible for the rest of the year.
And that includes copays. So even going to general, specialist, even those 30, 40, $50 copays, that we shouldn't be paying that either.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so knowing what your out-of-pocket maximum is not only important in picking a health insurance plan, but it's also important to know and keep track of so that when you walk into the doctor's office or a specialist's office and they say, pay us your copayment, you've already met your out-of-pocket maximum. So you actually don't owe a copayment anymore. Now, the doctor's office isn't necessarily going to know if you've met that out-of-pocket maximum or not yet. So you could be paying money out of pocket that you don't need to if you're not keeping track of where you're at.
Okay. And so it would be good for us to be able to communicate that to our physician's office, or is it something that we more than likely are going to have to pay the copay but get reimbursed at the end? How do we go about managing those waters?
We always try to help people avoid having to chase down their money to get it back.
Yeah.
So ideally, when you get told you need to pay a copayment, you can say to the person at the desk, I've already met my out-of-pocket maximum, so I don't owe any more copayments.
Okay.
And if they don't believe you, it's always helpful to actually carry one of those explanation of benefits with you that says you've met your out-of-pocket maximum, if it happens to show up there.
Okay.
Now, worst case scenario is that they don't believe you and they actually take the copayment, but then you can go and get it back from them later.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good to know.
So when you're actually going to compare those plans, knowing what your out-of-pocket maximum is part of that math equation. And your out-of-pocket maximum could be $1,000 for the year, or it could be $20,000 for the year. The amount is just going to depend on the plan that you have. So you take the monthly premium and you multiply it by 12, and then you add in that out-of-pocket maximum. Now, in most cases, if you're paying for a higher level of coverage where you have a higher monthly payment, you're going to have a lower out-of-pocket maximum.
Okay.
So oftentimes people get sticker shock by looking at a plan that maybe has a $300 a month premium, but has a $1,000 out-of-pocket maximum. In that math formula, what you end up paying over the course of the year is much less than maybe if you had a plan that was only $100 a month in a monthly premium, but has an $8,000 out-of-pocket maximum.
Okay.
So really the moral of the story is anytime you're comparing your plan choices is to do the math. And the way you do the math again is monthly premium times 12 plus the out-of-pocket maximum. And so sometimes it's going to be the lowest level of coverage that actually is the cheapest overall. Sometimes it's going to be a plan that has that higher monthly premium, but because they have a lower out-of-pocket maximum, your overall cost for the year is much less.
Right.
Now, this math problem is actually really only useful if you're in a situation where you're going to hit your out-of-pocket maximum during the year. For someone who is healthy and never goes to the doctor, you're probably not going to hit your out-of-pocket maximum. But for anyone in the cancer community, it's pretty likely you're going to hit that maximum, which is why that's how it's key to figuring out your overall costs for the year.
Okay. Okay.
So even though we don't think of health insurance and math as legal issues, this is actually really rooted in the law and understanding how our healthcare system works to be able to make effective choices. And sometimes it's going to save you thousands of dollars over the course of the year if you've picked that better plan for you.
Yeah.
We also don't really think about the idea that even if we have a plan that kind of works for us now, we want to make sure every single year it continues to work for us. And every single year, plan options are going to change. Employer plans change, marketplace plans change. And so every single year, it's worth just seeing what's out there and doing some comparisons to make sure it still covers your providers and covers your prescription drugs and still is the lowest cost for you.
Okay. How does coverage for prescriptions play into that annual fee, whether it's monthly or the maximum that a person has to pay per year? Does that play into that at all?
It does, and that's a great question. So, if we're talking about marketplace plans, they're required to include any co-payments or co-insurance amounts that you're paying for prescription drugs in that same out-of-pocket maximum.
Okay.
We are seeing more employer plans actually carving out prescription drug costs. So those prescription drug has have their own deductible and out-of-pocket maximum.
Okay.
So if you have a plan that has an additional out-of-pocket maximum for prescription drugs, then the math formula just has one more step. So in addition to the monthly premium and the out-of-pocket maximum, you're just adding in the out-of-pocket maximum for prescription drugs as well.
Got it. Okay. But we should be able to find that information when we're sort of looking at the total. What's the monthly? What's the annual? That should be where that information is as well. So when we go every year to review, it should be pretty clear.
Yes. And I do want to say that we have a ton of resources on this process, everything from a 5-minute animated video on how to pick a health insurance plan to a brand new worksheet to help you actually do that math.
I love that. That's wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Because I'm so happy that you've mentioned that equation a few times, but I know, it's really easy to forget. So I'm glad that we have those resources. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm not great at math, so that's why I'm a lawyer.
I remember it now, but ask me in an hour and I may not. So I know where to go to find it. So moving on to our next question, which is nicely related to this. What do we do when an insurance company says no? So we've picked the plan. We feel like we got the best value. We've done the math equation. Okay, now we're wanting coverage. We want something, and our insurance company says no. What do we do?
Unfortunately, it's incredibly common for an insurance company to deny coverage for treatment. And that could be, a surgery or a prescription drug or seeing a particular provider. And so we want people to know that they don't have to take no for an answer. There is the ability to appeal that denial. And there's some process involved with that. But this is one of those rights that people really don't take advantage of. And it's kind of why it's a soapbox issue for us, because we see how often people don't take advantage of the appeals process. And then they end up either paying for that care out of pocket or just not getting access to that care because they can't afford to pay for it out of pocket. And we don't want anyone to not get access to the care that their healthcare team is prescribing. So to give you some perspective on just how bad of a problem this is, the Department of Health and Human Services released some data for 2019 that said just for marketplace plans, about 40 million claims were denied. But only 0.2% of those denials were appealed. And so that's a crazy number of people who are basically
missing out.
Missing out on access to care. And I mean, if you think about the fact that what they're trying to get is medical care, it's terrifying because their healthcare team prescribed them that medical care for a reason. So with the appeals process, we know about 50% of the time when someone goes through the appeals process, they're getting access to the care that they need covered by their insurance company. So when you think about 40 million claim denials, that's about 20 million claims that should have been approved. And so we really want people to understand that they don't have to take no for an answer, and that they are going to be more likely to get access to the care that they need if they go through the appeals process.
Okay. And to initiate that appeals process, is that something that I would do as the patient? Is that something the medical team puts into play?
At the end of the day, it's really the patient's responsibility to file the appeal. There are definitely healthcare professionals that help with that process.
Okay.
So they have a system built in where they're appealing on behalf of their patients. But when someone's approaching the appeals process, it depends on the type of insurance that they have to get through the details of how to actually take it step by step through the appeals process. But if someone has an individual or employer sponsored plan, they generally have access to an internal appeal where they first ask their insurance company to reconsider. And if the insurance company still says no, they also have access to an external appeal. And this was a federal right created by the Affordable Care Act, where you get to go outside the insurance company and have an independent review organization take a look to see if the care that you're asking for is medically necessary. And then that decision is binding on the insurance company. So if they decide that it's medically necessary, the insurance company has to cover it. And on average, across the country, about 50% of the time, patients are being successful at that external appeals process.
Wow. That's great. And now that I think about it, I feel like when as a patient you get that decision letter in the mail, even if it's after we verbally know, there is usually some information in terms of how to go about appealing that. So maybe we can be on the lookout for those papers instead of just like filing them away or setting them to the side, of really reading that fine print.
Exactly. And, we always recommend people open their mail, which is, it's easy to pile
Yeah.
up and think, I'll deal with that later. But there could be really important information there, including how you actually have to appeal, and you have to meet certain deadlines. So we never want someone to miss out on an opportunity because they've missed a deadline.
Okay.
So that paperwork that has the denial is required to include information on how to appeal. It might be in small print on the back side of that piece of paper, but it should be there.
It should be there. Okay. Is there a period of time that a person has to initiate their appeal? Is it 90 days? Is it a year?
It's different based on what type of insurance someone has, but I would say you probably don't want to wait more than 2 months to appeal something.
Okay.
If you haven't yet gotten access to the care, it should be even less time, right? Because you want to be able to get access to the care timely.
Okay.
But generally, we want people to know that they have the right to appeal. And then we have a number of resources on our website that explain the different types of appeals processes based on the different types of insurance.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. Okay. Oh, I'm so glad we have a place now that we can go to, because there's so many interesting facets to all this. So it's wonderful.
Thanks.
Good. Okay. So now we're the patient and we have our insurance and we've got accepted and we're moving through and we're in treatment. How do we get help if we need assistance as we're moving through treatment? How do we go about that? And does everyone have access to help?
So if someone is trying to deal with a cancer diagnosis and continue to work, or even make decisions about whether or not they can continue to work, there are really important conversations that need to be had with their healthcare team about potential side effects from treatment and how to manage those side effects. But there are also some laws that provide protection in the workplace for someone who is experiencing a serious medical condition.
Okay.
The Americans with Disabilities Act is a federal law that protects people against discrimination in the workplace based on their medical condition, but also gives them access to reasonable accommodations. And reasonable accommodations is a legal term that basically describes any type of change in the workplace that can help someone continue to do their job or return to work.
Okay.
And so we think this is probably the most underutilized legal tool that exists to help patients manage a cancer diagnosis if they're trying to work.
Okay.
Or even if they're trying to take time off work or they're trying to get back into the workplace.
Okay.
So reasonable accommodations are really broad under the law. but they could be literally anything that helps someone continue to do their job. So maybe it's around schedule changes, or maybe it's readjusting the workspace to actually make
Hmm.
it easier for someone to work, or maybe you get a closer parking spot if you have extreme fatigue, or maybe you're utilizing some version of technology to help you keep doing your job. We have a ton of resources again on our website about accommodations and how to navigate them, and to really think creatively about what's posing the challenge for you at work and what could potentially be available to help you address those challenges so that you can continue to work.
That's a really great thought to kind of think through all of this. And again, this is something once I, as a patient, have talked over with my medical team, I would reach out to the American Disabilities Act or find that contact information from your website and start that process.
Yeah, so the reasonable accommodations, you actually go to your employer and ask them for those accommodations.
Okay.
And we have some tools about helping you write a letter to your employer or even to have those conversations. There's actually also a lot of really useful tools that exist to help people with this process. So, the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN, is a federal program of the US Department of Labor that actually exists to help employers and employees navigate accommodations. And so they have a ton of useful tools on their website to help you think through possible accommodations and then how to have those conversations.
That is wonderful because I would imagine it can be quite stressful if you're trying to have this conversation with your employer. You don't know the right thing to say. It's a very emotional time. So, to have a little bit of guidance, I really love that. Now, these accommodations through this act is it something where they're in place for a particular period of time? Is it something that a person has to check in regularly? Is timing an issue at all?
Actually, it's not. There's no requirement that you have worked there for a certain period of time. Once you're employed, or even really when you're a job applicant, the ADA is providing protection. Now, you have to meet some requirements in order to be protected under the law, like working for the right type of employer and actually being qualified for the job. And then you also have to have a disability under the ADA's definition of disability. But
Okay.
generally speaking, someone with a cancer diagnosis is going to meet those requirements uh, for having a disability, and then getting access to those protections against discrimination, and then access to reasonable accommodations.
Okay.
The ADA is a federal law, and so it applies in all states, but it only applies to private employers with 15 or more employees. So if you work for a smaller employer, the ADA actually doesn't protect you. However, most states actually have a state version of the ADA that covers smaller employers, and most of those state laws are providing similar protections in terms of protection against discrimination and accessing accommodations. And on our website, we have a chart that shows all the states and how big the employer has to be to get access to protection under that state law.
Oh, I love that as like a quick reference because I'm sure with, so people from all over in our community are maybe wondering, like, I wonder if my state has it and what that is. So that's a really great visual to have. Good. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Um, in terms of, so you mentioned getting accommodations with work, being able to, continue working at 100%. So if a person has to take time away or time off, um, are they able to do that and still get paid for it? Or is it something that, once they've exceeded their paid time off, they have to take it without pay? Are they able to continue having financial support?
It depends. And that frequently is an answer that we have to give people because the rules are different based on your specific employer, but also what state that you live in. But generally, if you're trying to take time off from work, the ADA actually can be useful as well because taking time off could be a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. But also, there's the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act, or the FMLA.
FMLA, yep.
And the
Okay.
FMLA allows people to take up to 12 weeks of leave per year, but that leave is unpaid leave, which is actually a huge downside because most people who qualify for FMLA leave don't take it because they can't afford to have that lack of income.
Right.
And so that's a huge downside to the FMLA, but it does protect your job while you're taking that time off, and it protects your health insurance coverage if you get your health insurance coverage through your employer. So if you normally, the employer pays 75% and you pay 25% of your premiums, that has to continue for the period of time you're on FMLA leave. But the challenge with the FMLA, besides it being unpaid, is that you have to work for an employer with 50 or more employees, and you have to work there at least a year, and you have to have worked there at least 1,250 hours in the last year that you worked for the employer. So those are a lot of hoops to jump through to get access to the FMLA.
Yeah.
But if you qualify, it's a huge benefit because it does provide that job and health insurance protection.
Okay.
But if we're talking about paid leave, there is really only disability insurance. And disability insurance is insurance that is going to pay you for periods of time that you're unable to work because of a serious medical condition. And there are different types of disability insurance. So there is private insurance that you can buy directly from an insurance company. And I would say most people don't do that because we really don't think of the potential in the future of having a disability. And so I would say generally Americans don't proactively purchase disability insurance, but most people get access to it through an employer. And an employer could provide a short-term and or a long-term disability policy. And so many people have told me over the years, oh, I don't have that. And I sent them back to check their employee manual. And it turns out that they do, because it was just a piece of paper they signed on their first day of work. And the employer paid the premiums. And so they just forgot all about it. Wow. So it's worth double checking to see if that's something you have access to at work.
Wow. Do you think, I have one quick question. I don't mean to interject. Would it be worth, even as a person gets older, to look into a private disability insurance? Do you think that's worthwhile?
I would say it's definitely worthwhile. A 20-year-old has a 1 in 4 chance of dealing with a disability at some point in their life. Unfortunately, with disability insurance, the pre-existing condition protections that exist in health insurance don't exist in disability insurance. So once you have a pre-existing medical condition, it's very difficult to buy a private disability insurance plan.
Oh, okay.
And it certainly also gets harder as you get older, because as you get older, the chances of you having some type of pre-existing condition goes up.
Right. Okay.
So if you don't have access to a disability insurance plan, either from a company or through your employer, you may live in a state that has a state disability insurance option. But those only include California, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Hawaii, and Puerto Rico.
Okay. Oh.
So it's a pretty limited group. But if you do live in one of those states, that state disability insurance system is one that you pay into through your payroll taxes. And it's hugely beneficial because it gives you up to a year in some states of a short-term disability coverage, where you're getting access to between 50 and about 80% of your salary when you were working.
And so anyone that's working in that state would have access to that sort of disability as being a resident or being a worker in that state. Is that correct?
If they're paying into the system. So sometimes, excuse me, like federal employees who are working in that state, they don't pay into the state disability insurance system in most cases. So it is important for you to check to see if you pay in. And one easy way to do that is to look at your W-2 or your pay stub. And it says usually some version of SDI or DI for disability insurance.
Yeah. Okay.
So besides state disability insurance, then we get to the 2 federal long-term disability programs that are both run through the Social Security Administration. And there's Supplemental Security Income, which is SSI, and there's Social Security Disability Insurance, which is SSDI. And the 2 programs have a very high standard of disability, that your medical condition is expected to last at least a year or longer, and that it impacts your ability to do your current job and really any job that you've had for the last 15 years. So they really have an expectation, not just that you have a medical condition, but that it's keeping you from working.
Wow.
So with those programs, there's lots of details and nuance, and we do have information about how to access those programs and tips for applying and appealing if you get denied in the application process.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, SSI is for individuals who have a low income and low resource level, whereas SSDI is for individuals who have paid into the Social Security retirement system, but are technically getting access to those benefits early because they have a disability and need access to those benefits.
Okay. Okay. And you said for those that may be interested in looking into either one of those two programs, you have information on your website about how to go about doing that?
We do. We even have an hour-long webinar on disability insurance that people can watch to understand all of their options and then how to actually navigate those systems.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I will say, as just a little teaser, because we will have you back in November for our speaker series, we will be touching on, or the topic will be all about health insurance. So, if at any point, if this sort of insurance question comes in, or if someone does try to look into these on their own, be sure to join us in November so they can get, ask their questions or have access to you for a little bit of guidance.
Absolutely.
Okay, good, good, good. Well, to wrap up, we've covered a lot. It's a lot of information. I know my head is like spinning with, okay, what do I have to know? What's that equation again? But I'm glad we have your website. Is there any other cancer-related legal issue or question that a person should be thinking about, they should be inquiring about, be prepared about?
Well, there are definitely a whole host of other potential legal issues that might come up for someone, whether it's, how to manage medical bills and understanding consumer protections or housing issues that someone might be facing. But I would say one really important area is to make sure that you have the right documents in place for planning ahead. And this really applies to everyone who is over the age of 18. We want to make sure that people have the right estate planning documents in place. And a lot of times people say to me, well, I don't have any money. I don't need to worry about that. And the truth is there are other pieces to an estate plan that could be very relevant, including having an advanced healthcare directive so that if at some point in the future you aren't able to make medical decisions for yourself, you've either appointed someone to make those decisions or you've written out those decisions, or both. You can do both of those things. Okay. So there's lots of pieces to estate planning that we want people to understand and to make sure that they have the right documents in place. Even, for example, if you are the parent of a younger adult, but that younger adult could give you access to information about your medical condition. So making sure that you've signed a HIPAA form so your parent can actually get access to that information. All of those details need to be documented. Okay. And even though we kind of don't think about them, again, when someone in our family is sick, we don't think about HIPAA forms, but they could be really important for family members to be able to provide support for each other.
Right, right.
And
okay.
We do have a lot of resources on estate planning. And again, everything from animated videos to state-specific toolkits.
Okay, that's great. So the resources that you provide, a person could do that on their own. It's not necessarily, they don't need to work with an estate planner, but we could sort of manage it on our own if we wanted to start there.
In most cases, you could. Certainly things like advanced healthcare directives and powers of attorney for financial affairs, it's not required that you use an attorney. And in some states, there are state-specific forms that you just have to fill out and either have witnessed when you sign or potentially have them notarized.
Okay. Well, good to know. Yeah, because I know sometimes that can feel a little bit intimidating, like, oh, I have to get a lawyer and I don't know. So to know that we can do it on our own, that's wonderful.
Yes. And that's why we created the toolkit so that people could see what the rules are in their specific state, because estate planning is state specific, and then to also have access to any forms that are available.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And we did have a comment from a person that is watching and said she commented she was already working from home from COVID and she was able to get approval to continue doing that. It was a lot easier to deal with the side effects from the meds, et cetera. So I think sort of looking into maybe the ADA and just allowing her to keep working in that condition that is best for her, what a benefit.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of a reasonable accommodation. And certainly, COVID has made it a lot easier to argue that we can work from outside a particular workplace location.
Yeah.
We've all figured out what's possible in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking outside the box for sure. For sure. Wonderful. Well, uh, I cannot thank you enough for being here. We've covered a ton of information. This was super helpful. I think it gave a lot of us some things to think about, maybe put some wheels into motion in terms of, what we should all be doing to prepare, how we can be strategic in terms of picking insurances or just kind of reviewing every year. So I do so appreciate you being here, answering our questions, sharing your knowledge. We can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you so much for having me and being able to share the resources that we have available.
You're very welcome. And again, I just want to tease that we will have Joanna back for our speaker series. So it's a little bit lengthier of a conversation, a little bit more educational, but she will be explaining more about the health insurance world. So be sure to look out for that on social media for how you can register and how we can have some more time with our amazing expert. So Joanna, thank you again for being here. We hope everyone learned a lot. This will be recorded and shared on her library if anyone wasn't able to stay on the whole time or wants to check this out in the future. So thank you again. Enjoy your afternoon and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.